Today, if you open xAI's ecosystem, the product landscape has fundamentally shifted. As of August 12, 2026, xAI has introduced Grok, an AI teammate designed to work through its own computer and carry out tasks across digital tools. The promise is raw productivity, an AI that doesn't just answer questions, but takes action. For anyone tracking the artificial intelligence market, the immediate reaction is hard to ignore. Wait, Grok can do that now? And immediately, a much bigger question takes over. Why is giving Grok more freedom potentially a danger to the company that built it? Because months before Grok was given the keys to operate its own computer, xAI was already fighting a much larger, much more dangerous battle. It was a crisis born from a single foundational design choice. What happens when you build an artificial intelligence, make it radically more permissive than its competitors, and then unleash it onto hundreds of millions of users? To understand why Grokbot's expansion matters today, we have to look backward. We have to examine how Elon Musk's AI startup positioned itself as the anti-OpenAI, and how that very strategy turned freedom into a corporate liability. When xAI formed in July 2023, the generative AI market was already crowded. Competitors like OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google had already built extensive safety systems around their consumer AI products. In a market saturated with cautious corporate chatbots, xAI positioned Grok to be maximum truth-seeking, humorous, and, crucially, less restricted. It was designed to appeal directly to users frustrated by what they saw as corporate censorship and ideological gatekeeping. Why did that positioning matter to the business? Because being less restricted was the core product hook that allowed a brand new startup to instantly carve out market share against multi-billion-dollar incumbents. Yet that exact commercial strategy created an immediate high-stakes question. What happens when a deliberately permissive AI meets the chaotic, unrestricted reality of hundreds of millions of users online? The answer didn't take long to arrive. The pressure point arrived when xAI integrated advanced image generation capabilities directly into X, embedding the technology into a massive, highly active social media platform. Unlike closed enterprise tools tested in isolated corporate labs, Grok's image generator was exposed instantly to an open, viral environment. Updates rolled out rapidly. Users quickly discovered that prompts that triggered instant blocks on competing platforms passed freely through Grok. At first, the results were viral novelties, absurd internet memes, satirical political imagery, and bizarre mashups that dominated X's trending feeds. Musk championed this user-driven creativity, reinforcing the narrative that Grok was a tool unshackled from corporate censorship. Began asking, and when they opened their files, the controversy moved from online complaints to institutional enforcement. The controversy moved somewhere xAI couldn't simply moderate away: international regulatory oversight. What did the regulators actually find? On June 11th, the Canadian Privacy Commissioner announced its conclusion: X Corp and xAI had violated Canada's federal private sector privacy law. Why was that specific ruling a turning point for the company? Because the problem wasn't simply that individual users had abused the tool. The investigation found that the tool had been launched without appropriate safeguards from the outset, directly implicating the company's deployment decisions in the resulting harm. And that created a much bigger question: what happens when a product's design itself becomes part of the legal argument? Lawsuits materialized in federal courts, with plaintiffs naming the platform and its underlying technology in legal filings alleging severe harm, emotional distress, and platform negligence. How did xAI defend itself against these claims? In court filings, xAI pointed to the mechanics of user interaction, arguing that individual users generated the content through their own prompts. Plaintiffs and legal critics countered that when a model is explicitly marketed as less restricted and integrated directly into a viral distribution feed, the platform shares responsibility for the output it enables. And while regulators and plaintiffs pressed from the outside, a new kind of pressure was building from the inside. Were some of these safety risks visible from inside the company while Grok was being developed? According to a wrongful termination lawsuit filed by former xAI engineer Devin Kim, internal warnings about Grok's safety protocols were allegedly marginalized during the rush to deploy product features. The complaint alleges that safety teams raised red flags regarding the speed of shipping models without adequate guardrails, only to find their concerns sidelined in favor of aggressive product timelines and competitive parity with rival labs. Note, these points remain allegations within the framework of ongoing litigation, and xAI has defended its operational integrity. Why did this particular lawsuit change the public narrative? Because it bridged the gap between accidental software failure and deliberate corporate priority, giving critics a framework to argue that leadership knew the risks and chose speed over safety. Before that internal question could be resolved, the controversy broke containment entirely. It moved from corporate boardrooms and federal capitals straight into state capitals. The escalation was accelerating. First, it was online backlash, then regulatory findings, then civil lawsuits and internal employee allegations, now government intervention. State governments, frustrated by federal inaction, began drafting their own statutes. None was more direct than Minnesota, which passed aggressive legislation explicitly targeting AI nudification technology and the unauthorized generation of deepfake sexual imagery. Why did this particular law pose an existential threat to xAI? Because if every state could impose its own distinct liability framework on generative AI, the open, uninhibited deployment model xAI relied upon would become legally unviable. The confrontation was inevitable, but instead of complying quietly, xAI chose to take the fight directly to the federal judiciary. By late July, xAI filed a direct legal challenge against the state of Minnesota in federal court, racing against the clock, just days before the law was set to take effect. In its court filings, xAI argued that the state's anti-nudification law violated the First Amendment, asserting that the legislation was unconstitutionally overbroad and infringed upon protected speech. At the same time, xAI's legal team acknowledged the state's legitimate interest in preventing non-consensual artificial nude imagery, a careful legal maneuver designed to show reasonableness while attacking the mechanics of the law itself. Why was this legal strategy a high-stakes gamble for the company? Because while framing the lawsuit as a defense of free expression positioned xAI as a constitutional champion, it also forced the company into a direct public collision with state police powers. And what happened when the legal challenge met the bench? The judge declined to temporarily block the law, meaning the Minnesota restrictions remained in effect while xAI's broader legal challenge continued. So what happens when xAI's legal fight continues while the law is already in force? It means the company is forced to litigate constitutional theory while operating under a state restriction it sought to dismantle. And what happens if every new capability creates a new regulatory fight? That question leads directly back to where we started. The company had just faced regulatory findings from Canada over Grok's image generation safeguards, ongoing lawsuits, internal safety allegations, and a federal showdown in Minnesota where the law remained active. And now it was giving the same product a brand new ability to operate a computer. The launch of Grokbot proves that xAI's strategy has not fundamentally changed. The company is doubling down on capability, autonomy, and power. Why does this new capability dramatically raise the stakes of the previous scandals? Because if a permissive, less restricted chatbot could trigger international privacy investigations and multi-state legal battles through image generation, an autonomous agent with its own computer introduces an entirely new tier of operational risk. The margin for error has shrunk to zero, and the consequences of failure are no longer just an offensive image on a timeline. They are operational, financial, and systemic.
Whatever the company's internal calculation, the pattern is clear. Despite the legal and regulatory pressure, xAI has continued pushing Grok toward greater capability and autonomy. Over recent months, the company has steadily rolled out advanced model iterations, agentic task execution, automated workflows, and software integrations across workplace and productivity tools. Why has xAI maintained this exact trajectory despite the friction? Because in the high-stakes economics of artificial intelligence, deployment velocity remains the primary metric of survival. And that may be the most important takeaway of this entire corporate saga. Because the question is no longer whether Grok can become more powerful. It clearly can. The question is whether the company can keep control of the consequences as it does. Because if every new capability creates a new legal battle, a new regulatory response, or a new safety crisis, eventually the problem isn't whether Grok can compete with OpenAI, Google, or Anthropic. The problem is whether xAI can keep scaling Grok without losing control of the consequences created by Grok. And that is the question Elon Musk's AI company still hasn't completely answered. If you want to see what happens when the biggest companies in technology lose control of the products they built, subscribe.